Hello, Legacy students. Welcome to part 2 of how to complete the square. Please make sure, if you have not, please make sure that you watch the first part of how to complete the square, just so you can get the visual appearance of what does it actually mean, how do we get these numbers, that kind of thing. So, completing the square, it's quite simple actually. It's the same number of steps over and over and over to do the exact same things for every single problem. So what we're going to first do is we're first going to get our C value right here to the other side. It's going to make it easier for us. So I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides. And we'll be left with x squared plus 4x. And then what I'm going to do is plus blank. I'm going to make room for blank on both sides. That way it makes it easier for us to fill in the blank. Well, on part 1 of the video, we talked about how to find the blank. That's when we used the x squared tiles and the x tiles and stuff. And we found how to find the C value by taking our B value, 4, dividing it in 2, and then squaring. So I would get 2 squared, which is 4. So my blank will be 4. Now, what did this just do? It allowed us to make the left-hand side of this quadratic a factorable quadratic. That makes it so we can actually solve this polynomial. So what I'm going to do, it looks like it's a trinomial, so 3 terms. I'm going to make this into AC method. So I have 4, because 1 times 4, 2 and 2, right? So I can write this as x plus 2, x plus 2. Ultimately, guys, remember, if your A is 1, you do not need to go through the grouping phase if your A is 1. You can just put the 2 numbers with x in there. This is right now equal to 3. And I know I once upon a time said, please make sure that you're equal to 0 before you factor. Completing the square is the only time that you can kind of disobey that rule if you want to consider it that way. Now notice, guys, on this left-hand side, I have x plus 2 times x plus 2. It's too bad we can't rewrite that using a shorter hand notation. Which we can, right? If I have something written twice, all that means is I would have x plus 2 squared equals 3, right? Because if I have x times x, that's x squared. Means this write twice. So this write twice. Now I can solve this. You've solved this before. We've solved by solving by the square root. So I'm going to square root both sides. Squared and square root cancel each other out. I'm left with x plus 2 equals plus or minus, don't forget the plus or minus, square root of 3. Now x is not alone. Subtract the 2 from both sides. I get x equals negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 3 for my final answer. Let's try another example when my leading coefficient is 1. So, first things first, kick C to the other side. So I'm going to be x squared, negative 12x, ooh, my pen's going funky monkey, plus blank equals negative 4 plus blank. Now, you're probably saying, Marsh, why are we putting blank on both sides? Well, if I add something to this side, I got to add something to this side. It's a balanced equation. You got to be balanced. So, let's find blank. So middle term, negative 12, divide that by 2, and then square it. So negative 6 squared is 36. Now, this will always be plus because I'm squaring the number. It can never be negative because you're squaring. Something to keep in mind, okay? It looks like we can break it down using AC method now. So I have a positive 36, and I need to make a negative 12. Negative 6 and negative 6. That'll give me negative 12, won't it? And if I multiply, that gives me positive. So I can rewrite x minus 6 equals 32, it looks like, on that side. Now, remember, x minus 6 times x minus 6. It's so nice. I got to write it twice. So I'm going to put a squared up there. Square root both sides. I get x minus 6 equals, Square root of 32. I bet that breaks down. 4 and 8. 8 breaks down further, though. What about 16 and 2? That'll work. 16 and 2. So I'll get 4 square root of 2. I almost forgot my plus or minus. Almost. Add 6 to both sides. So we're going to get x equals 6 plus or minus 4 square root 2. Final answer to my problem. Second part, completing the square. Now, notice, guys, bum, bum, bum. There's a number in front of x squared. But, careful. Look. All the other numbers are divisible by that number. Something to keep in mind, completing the square only works when your a is 1. You can't complete the square if your a is not 1. So what you always need to do is divide by that a first. So we're going to divide everything by 2. Divide that 2 away. And we're left with x squared plus 4x plus 7 equals 0. That is now able to be used by completing the square. You can't complete the square if your a isn't 1. Okay? Let's subtract 7 from both sides. So I'm going to get x squared plus 4x plus blank equals negative 7 plus blank. Let's find blank. Middle term, 4. Divide that by 2. Square it. That's 4. 4. Whoops. So that'll be 2 and 2. So it'll be x plus 2, x plus 2. Now, all of them will always do this. If you did it correctly, if you found blank correctly, you should get what's known as a perfect square trinomial. It's one of those ones that are really nice, come out like x plus 2 squared. It's a special case kind of quadratic. Be careful, that always will happen. If you find C correctly, it should turn out to be that. I'm going to square root both sides. So I get x plus 2 equals the square root of negative 3. Don't forget the plus or minus on that. Now notice, guys, I do have the square root of negative 3. I still gets carried along. Don't forget about poor Mr. I. So I get to pull out an I. But I'm going to subtract 2 at the same time. So my final answer is x equals negative 2 plus or minus. There needs to be an I come out. So I square root of 3. And that is my final answer for 2x squared plus 8x plus 14 equals 0. My two solutions located are at negative 2 plus or minus I square root of 3. So, steps to completing the square. Here's what you need to do. First of all, make sure your leading coefficient is 1. Move the c to the other side. That's the make room for blank part. Complete the square on the left and add to both sides. Solve, just like you normally would solve. And then don't forget that plus or minus. Don't forget the buy one, get one free offer you always get when you square root. Okay? And that's the end of this video. See you later, Sabers.